message today is entitled, Be Like Fred. That's right, it's not a typo. Be like Fred. So, last week, I shared with those of you that were here, I shared with you how you can live a more joyful life. Anybody here want to live a more joyful life? So that's what we talked about last week, how we can live a more joyful life. A joyful life begins in your mind. A joyful life begins in your mind. The Apostle Paul, in the book of Philippians, he wrote frequently about the mind of a Christian. The mind of a Christian. In fact, that's why we're starting this new study on Wednesday night on the book of Philippians. We're going to be studying this because I want us as a church to move into the holiday season and into the beginning of this next year with a more joyful mindset. And so, Paul talks about this quite a bit. The truth, my manner of life, your manner of life, is a reflection of what occupies your mind. Everything about your life, everything about how you go about your life is a reflection of what's going on in your mind. The big truth that we looked at last week, and you'll see it on the screen, is that my feelings will always follow my focus. My feelings, your feelings will always follow your focus. So what are you focused on? And for those of you that were here last week, I'm sure this past week has been a week of you thinking about that. Thinking of it, catching yourself. When you discovered your feelings going in a certain direction, you've probably been thinking, okay, hold up, what am I focused on? How do I need to change my focus to alter the way my feelings are? Because my feelings always follow my focus. So today, we want to continue looking at this goal of living a more joyful life. But today is going to be centered around a question. This is the question. How can I go from a fearful life to a joyful life? How can I go from a fearful life to a joyful life? Notice that I'm speaking about our lives. I'm not speaking about an isolated event. I'm not speaking about a season of, in your life or a moment. I'm talking about your life. I'm talking about from starting today. Let's say 11:30. Till eternity. How can we go from a fearful life from 11:30 till eternity, a joyful life? You see, I believe that fear is the biggest obstacle in most people's lives today. Man, we're slammed. The notifications on my phone every day. Tragedy. This problem, that problem. This horrible thing, that horrible thing. I haven't even looked at my phone this morning, but I'm sure as soon as church is over and I pull it up and I just flip it and the notifications are in line. Tragedy. This. Hundred of people dead. This happened. This horrible thing. This terrible thing. And the result of it is that as humanity, doesn't matter what country you live in or what your situation, doesn't matter what neighborhood you live in, doesn't matter how much money you make or how much money you don't make. Fear is dominating people's lives. I believe it's the greatest obstacle facing people today. So let's look at this. Here's a definition. Fear is the painful emotion that rises up at the thought that we may be harmed or made to suffer in some way. Fear is a painful emotion that comes up, that rises up in us as soon as we think that we may be harmed or made to suffer. Again, it starts in your mind. That fear continues as long as we're subject to the will of someone who doesn't have our well-meaning in mind. You see, our world is full of enemies. Our world is full of enemies. And as long as we're subject to the possibility of harm from those enemies, fear is inevitable. Fear is inevitable because our world is full of enemies. There are tons of people and things that don't have your goodwill in mind. So the effort to try to conquer fear without removing the causes is impossible. You can chant all you want. You can meditate all you want. You can talk to yourself. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid. You can, whatever it is that you want to do, as long as the causes for fear exist, fear will be there. A.W. Tozer, he says this about our situation. Here's a quote, and you'll see it. He says, as long as we are in the hands of chance, as long as we look for hope to the law of averages, as long as we must trust for survival by our ability to outthink or outmaneuver the enemy, we have every good reason to be afraid. It's inevitable. As long as you're leaving it up to chance, law of averages, well, maybe if we move to a better place, maybe if I change jobs, maybe if we go somewhere else, maybe if we build a bigger fence, maybe if we buy that newfangled alarm system, maybe if I buy a gun. We have every good reason to be afraid. This is where most people are today. This is where you might be today. How many of you guys would agree with me that this is a problem? Houston, we have a problem. So today I'm going to give you the solution to this problem. But first I'm going to give you the why, and then I'm going to give you the how to solve this problem. But first, remember my message is entitled, Be Like Fred. So, come and listen to a story about a man named Fred. Fred Shepard was born on September 11th, 1855 in Ellenburg, New York. His father died when he was very young, and his mother spent most of her adult life as an invalid. And it was probably because of that situation that Fred, as he was growing up, really learned about illness and about caring for people. When he was a teenager, he went to a revival meeting at a church in town and received Jesus as Lord of his life. And so he threw himself totally into the Christian life. At the age of 22, he studied medicine. At the age of 27, he got married to a woman who was also a doctor. And then together, they felt a call on their lives to mission work. And so they got on a ship and they sailed to eastern Turkey. They spent the rest of their lives in eastern Turkey. He started a school of medicine. Over 220 men graduated from his school to help with the horrific disease that was rampant throughout the country of Turkey. His records show that by 1914, he had seen 6,000 patients in his clinic. He had called on over 2,000 patients in their homes. He only had 800 paying patients. His service in Turkey was so significant, he received decorations from the Red Cross, President Taft in 1909, and from the Sultan of Turkey in 1911. In 1908, there was a silver anniversary of his ministry. It was filled with Muslims, Catholics, Gregorians, Jews, Protestants. For 2 hours, these folks stood and talked about what Dr. Shepard had done for them. While reflecting over his ministry, he said that the celebration was really not about him, but about one even greater, God and his purpose in life. Now, I want you to listen to what he says at this celebration. First of all, he's talking about God's love. He says, because I have understood a little about that love, God's love, I try to let others know about it. This is my purpose in life. I did not come to this country to make money or a reputation. I came to bear witness that God is love. If by my work I have been able to show you him, I have had my reward, and I thank him. This was in 1908. I love what he says. Here's a man with his wife that changed the direction of an entire nation. When world leaders recognize what you do, that's a big deal. And that's what happened with him. Yet, in spite of all the things he did, all of his accomplishments, Fred Shepard was able to explain it all in such a really simple way. He explained everything in basically one sentence. I came to bear witness that God is love. Amen. What he says gives us a clue to the how and the why of our question. How do I go from living a fearful life to a joyful life? The why is this: because a life of joy begins when we respond to God's love. A joyful life begins when we respond to God's love. How many of you guys like rewards? Anybody here like rewards? Yeah. Anybody into bonuses? Yeah. Promotions? Yeah. Gifts? Of course you are. Notice that Fred says, I have already been rewarded. I've already been rewarded. And this is while, of course, he's being celebrated for what he's done. But he's saying, I've already been rewarded. I'm already in that joyful place before you did all these things for me. That's a joyful person speaking. His life has been rewarded continually. Yeah. He was in the bonus round continually. And he hadn't even seen heaven yet. That's a joyful life. So let's look at how we can do this. Let's look at the how. The how, the answer to the how question, do what Fred did. Right. Be like Fred. What did Fred do? Well, let's look at three things he mentions when he speaks here. Number one, he learned about God's love. He learned about God's love. He says, because I have understood a little about that love. Because I've understood a little about that love. Love is one of the attributes of God. One of the attributes of God. Love is not the definition of God, but it's an attribute of God. People quote 1 John 4:8, which says in part, God is love. But John, when he wrote this, wasn't giving a definition of God. God is not love. Love is an attribute of God. Love is something that's true of God. John was trying to explain something about God. Love is something that's true of God. We can learn more about what love is by looking at the other attributes of God. For example, God, we know that God is self-existent. So because God is self-existent, love then has no beginning. We know that God is eternal. Therefore, we know that love has no end. We know that God is all-powerful. We know that love has no limits as far as power. We know that because it's impossible for us to truly, understand, who God is, it's the same way with love. It's impossible for our minds to truly grasp a love that is beyond measure, because God is beyond measure. It's actually impossible for us to truly know what love is. It's impossible. But we can know how love manifests itself here. And one of the ways that we see how love manifests itself here, and this, I don't have time to go into like everything, but here's just one thing. Love reveals itself to us as goodwill. It's goodwill. Love wills the good of all and never wills harm for anyone or anything. Love always wills the good. That's why the Apostle John also said in 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. Where there's love, God's love, there is no fear. Fear can't exist where love actually truly is. Think about this. A small child lost in a crowded store, surrounded by strangers. They become filled with fear. But then the mother steps in, picks the child up in her arms, and the fear immediately goes away. Why? Because when the mother picked that child up, that child knew immediately, they knew immediately that there was goodwill. The mother only willed the good for that child. It eliminated the question. The known goodwill of the mother drove that fear away. For thousands and thousands of years, people have learned this truth, that love wills the good, never wills harm or bad. Thousands of years, people have learned this truth and climbed into the arms of a loving God and have lived lives without fear at all. The Bible is filled with these stories, filled with these exploits of these people. But the key is always God's love. It's always, the root is always God's love. For example, look at this portion of Psalm 23. Pretty much everyone has heard Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. But look at this now from the context of love. Starting in verse 4, he says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In other words, because I'm in your house. Because I'm in your house. And I'm in your arms. Experiencing your love and your goodwill, I don't have to be afraid of anything. Nothing. Everybody else can be freaking out, worried about this and that, fretting, I'm chilled because I'm in your house, in your arms. Just like that small child in the store. Fear is driven away because I'm in your house, in your arms. Nothing can touch me. Anybody here want to be untouchable?
Yes.
Yay. So be like Fred and learn about God's love. It's there for you to learn about it. Because when you learn about God's love, when you learn about God, you learn about God's love.
Yes.
So number one, he learned about God's love. Number two, he owned what he learned. He owned what he learned. He says, because I have understood a little about that love, I try. In other words, he took what he learned and then started using it. You know, I really enjoyed Friday night being at the ladies' conference that we did here, that Luann put on. Great food, always one of my favorites. Great food, great fellowship, great teaching. And it was really, really cool to get to hear all the ladies speak about their businesses. They had tables and they set up, it's kind of like a conference. They set up tables and they had a chance to get on the microphone and share a little bit about their business and what they offer and what they do. And it was really, really cool to hear all that. One thing that I noticed was that each presentation of a business came with an actionable event. An actionable, event. You had to do something.
Right.
You had to do something. You had to start something, or you had to buy something. But there was some actionable aspect to every presentation. It wasn't a thing where somebody was like, "Oh, well, this is my business. This is what what we're doing," and we don't want you to do anything. We just want you to listen and just kind of think about it. No, it was. We want to help you lose weight, so here's what you have to do.
Right.
Here's what you have to buy. There's always some actionable aspect to it. Because benefits only come when you learn and then do something. This is so amazing. For some reason, we have no issue with this anywhere else in the world. But as soon as people come into the church, it's like they turn that part of their brain off. And it's like, well, this is great. I get to sit and just fill my head with things and then forget about them as I walk out. But you have to do something. You don't just learn, you don't get a benefit unless you learn and then do it, put it into practice. Am I just speaking to myself here? Does anybody here know what I'm talking about? Learning about God's love is where we start. But then you actually have to go into his house and climb into his arms.
Right.
The arms don't just, it's not like a merry-go-round or, a Ferris wheel where you just kind of stand there and then the chair comes and picks you up. And, God's not a Ferris wheel, amen? You got to climb up. There's got to be some action on your part. So be like Fred. The Bible talks about grabbing a hold. It uses language like receiving. Salvation even only comes when you receive. It's not a Ferris wheel. It's not, well, my grandfather, he was a pastor, so I guess that means I'm like, grandfathered in, You're in for a big surprise at the end of your life. We have to receive. We have to take. We have to own. So be like Fred. Number 3, last one. He shared what he experienced. First we learn, then we do, then we share. He says, because I've understood a little about that love, I try to let others know about it. You see, another thing about love is that it's active and it's creative.
Yeah.
It's one of the awesome things about love. It's active and creative. Love motivates. Love motivates us to do things, to do bold things, like get on a ship to a faraway place, treat thousands of disease-ridden people. This was before penicillin.
Right.
But Fred Shepard and his wife could do that because they weren't afraid.
Right.
They weren't afraid. They lived in God's love, and the ultimate purpose of their lives were to let other people know about that love. Because when you experience that love, you can't help but tell other people about it. So how can I go from a fearful life to a joyful life? How? Do what Fred did. Be like Fred. Turn to the person next to you. Be like Fred. Tell them, be like Fred. See, this is how you're going to remember. You'll forget everything else I said today. We went to that church and that black guy was talking about being like Fred. You'll remember that. Do what Fred did. Be like Fred. He learned about God's love. He owned what he learned. And then he shared what he learned. Why? Why did he do those things? Because a life of joy begins when we respond to God's love. I want you guys to bow your heads. Everything begins, everything good, all eternal good begins when we respond to God's love.
I want to encourage all of you that are watching to continue to give faithfully to Celebration Church. There's so many different ways that you can do that. Of course, you can mail it in or drop by our location, which is 990 Meadowgate Road in Meta Vista, California, 95722. You can give online a couple of different ways. You can always use PayPal. Use the PayPal address of onecelebration@sbcglobal.net, or you can go to our website, our church website, which is www.ccfellowship.org. Go to the home page, go up to the About Us tab, pull that down, and go to Give Now, and then there's a donate button that'll take you to our online giving page. And text giving is available as well. That's probably the fastest way to give to our church, and that is you text the word give to area code 530-288-4500, and you can give your tithe and offering to Celebration that way as well. And always, if you're watching on our YouTube channel at Celebration Church Office, subscribe and click like.
We're so glad you decided to join us today. We hope you were blessed and encouraged. If you gave your life to Christ or want to reach out to us in any way, please email us at celebrationchurch13@gmail.com. To purchase Lou Ann Lee worship CDs and songbooks, click the links below. God bless you.